want to read a quote by the brave abolitionist orator Frederick Douglass in 1857. "If there is no struggle, there is no progress. Those who profess to favor freedom and yet appreciate agitation are men who want crops without plowing up the ground. They want rain without thunder and lightning. They want the ocean without the awful roar of its many waters. This struggle may be a moral one, or it may be a physical one, or it may be both moral and physical. Find out just what a people will submit to, and you have found out the exact amount of injustice and wrong which will be imposed upon them. And these will continue until they are resisted, with either words or blows, or with both. The limits of tyrants are prescribed by the endurance of those whom they oppress." And we have tyrants in the White House.
From our studio in New York, Bill Moyers.
Welcome to The Journal. You can hardly pick up a newspaper or watch television or go online without being made aware of what could be described as a constitutional crisis. That is, a decisive moment, a time of great difficulty, a turning point. And that's certainly the case right now with the controversy over presidential power and the role of Congress. Bruce Fein is a constitutional scholar who served in the Justice Department during the Reagan years and as general counsel of the Federal Communications Commission. He's been affiliated with prominent conservative think tanks such as the American Enterprise Institute and the Heritage Foundation. He now writes a weekly column for the Washington Times and Politico.com. Bruce Fein wrote the first article of impeachment against President Clinton when he was charged by the House of Representatives with perjury. Perjury is a crime, and Bruce Fein believes no one is above the law. John Nichols is the Washington correspondent for The Nation and an associate editor of the Capital Times. He wrote this book on the genius of impeachment, the founder's cure for royalism. Good to see you both. You wrote that article of impeachment against Bill Clinton.
I think Bush's crimes are a little bit different. I think they're a little bit more worrisome than Clinton's. You don't have to have...
More worrisome?
More worrisome than Clinton's. Because he is seeking more institutionally to cripple checks and balances and the authority of Congress and the judiciary to superintend his assertions of power. He has claimed the authority to tell Congress they don't have any right to know what he's doing with relation to spying on American citizens, using that information in any way that he wants, in contradiction to a federal statute called the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. He's claimed authority to say he can kidnap people, throw them into dungeons abroad, dump them out into Siberia without any political or legal accountability. These are standards that are totally anathema to a democratic society devoted to the rule of law.
I think that the war on terror, as defined by our president, is perpetual war. And I think that he has acted precisely as Madison feared. He has taken powers unto himself that were never intended to be in the executive.
Republicans, and I don't see any strong evidence that the Democrats are playing the role you think that Congress should be playing.
That is correct, but it doesn't exculpate the president that Congress has not sought immediately to sanction his excesses.
But it enables it.
Exactly right. And Bill, this could not happen if we had a Congress that was aggressive. If we had a Congress of the like at Watergate when Nixon was president and he tried to obstruct justice and defeat the course of law. We have a Congress that basically is invertebrate.
It's a much deeper problem. I think the members of our Congress have no understanding of the Constitution. And as a result, they don't understand their critical role in the governance of the country. When the Republicans are in charge, they see their job as challenging or as supporting the president in whatever he does, defending him, making it possible for him to do whatever he wants. When the Democrats are in charge, they seem to see their role as trying to score political points as opposed to what ought to be sort of a common ground.
In the past, there's always been a few statesmen who said, you know, the political fallout doesn't concern me as much as the Constitution of the United States. We have to keep that undefiled for our posterity, because if it's not us, it will corrode. It will disappear on the installment plan. And that has been true in the past when we had during Watergate Republicans. Remember, it was Barry Goldwater, Mr. Republican, who approached the president and said, you've got to resign. There have always been that cream who've said, the country is more important than my party. We don't have that anymore today.
So it seems to me the country is ahead of the Congress on this. Oh, yeah. How do you explain all this talk about impeachment today out across the country?
People don't want to let this go. They do not accept Nancy Pelosi's argument that impeachment is, quote unquote, off the table, because I guess maybe they're glad she didn't take some other part of the Constitution off the table, like freedom of speech. But they also don't accept the argument that, oh, well, there's a presidential campaign going on, so let's just hold our breaths till Bush and Cheney get done. When I go out across America, what I hear is something that's really very refreshing and very hopeful about this country. An awfully lot of Americans understand what Thomas Jefferson understood, and that is that the election of a president does not make him a king for 4 years. That if a president sins against the Constitution and does damage to the Republic, the people have a right in an organic process to demand of their House of Representatives, the branch of government closest to the people, that it act to remove that president. And I think that sentiment is afoot in the land.
This is the first time I've heard talk of impeaching both a president and a vice president. I mean, as you saw in that poll, more people want to impeach Dick Cheney than George Bush. What's going on?
Well, this is an unusual pair of president-vice president, where the vice president is de facto president most of the time. And that's why most of the people recognize that these decisions, especially when it comes to overreaching with executive power, are the product of Dick Cheney and his aide David Addington, not George Bush and Alberto Gonzales or Harriet Miers, who don't have the cerebral capacity to think of these devilish ideas. And for that reason, they equate the administration more with Dick Cheney than with George Bush. We're talking about assertions of power that affect the individual liberties of every American citizen. Opening your mail, your emails, your phone calls, breaking and entering your home, creating a pall of fear and intimidation. If you say anything against the president, you may find retaliation very quickly. We're claiming he's setting precedents that will lie around like loaded weapons anytime there's another 9/11. Right now, the victims are people whose names most Americans can't pronounce, and that's why they're not so concerned. They will start being Browns and Jones and Smiths, and that precedent is being set right now. And one of the dangers that I see is this: not just President Bush, but the presidential candidates for 2008 aren't standing up and saying, if I'm president, I won't imitate George Bush. That shows me that this is a far deeper problem than Mr. Bush and Cheney.
That struck me about your writings and your book. You say your great fear is that Bush and Cheney will hand off to their successors a toolbox that they will not avoid using.
Well, let's try a metaphor. Let's say that when George Washington chopped down the cherry tree, he used the wood to make a little box. And in that box, the president puts his powers. We've taken things out, we've put things in over the years. On January 20th, 2009, if George Bush and Dick Cheney are not appropriately held to account, this administration will hand off a toolbox with more powers than any president has ever had. More powers than the founders could have imagined. And that box may be handed to Hillary Clinton, or it may be handed to Mitt Romney, or Barack Obama, or someone else. But whoever gets it, one of the things we know about power is that people don't give away the tools. They don't give them up. The only way we take tools out of that box is if we sanction George Bush and Dick Cheney now and say the next president cannot govern as these men have.